Nestled within the Gospel of Luke, chapter 15, lies the parable of the Prodigal Son, a tale of loss, redemption, and boundless love. Jesus shared this parable with his disciples, painting a vivid picture of a father's love and the journey of two sons. The younger son's yearning for freedom and the elder son's sense of duty and resentment are themes that resonate with families even today. The parable invites us to witness their joys and sorrows and to discover ourselves in their midst. The parable of the Prodigal Son transcends time with its themes of love, acceptance, and belonging. The younger son's journey mirrors the human tendency to seek fulfillment in fleeting pleasures, while his return highlights the power of repentance and forgiveness. The elder son's reaction reveals the struggle to forgive and the corrosive nature of jealousy. This tale reminds us that true fulfillment lies in love, forgiveness, and reconciliation. The parable offers deeper meanings and interpretations, often seen as an allegory for God's boundless love and mercy. The father represents the divine parent who welcomes his children back, no matter how far they have strayed. The prodigal son's journey symbolizes the soul's search for meaning, while the father's embrace represents unconditional love. This story reminds us that there is always a path back to love and grace. Life on the family estate was stable, but the younger son felt a growing unease. He yearned for a life less ordinary, free from tradition and expectation. Tales of bustling cities and exotic cultures fueled his desire for adventure and independence. The seeds of discontent began to take root, pushing through the surface of his seemingly idyllic life. One afternoon, the younger son's discontent boiled over into a daring proposition. He asked his father for his inheritance in advance, a breach of tradition. The father, understanding the futility of holding him back, consented with a heavy heart. The younger son received his inheritance, his pockets heavy with newfound freedom. With his inheritance, the younger son set off for a distant country. He immersed himself in extravagance, squandering his wealth on fleeting pleasures. The city became his playground, a stage for his fantasies of freedom and self-indulgence. For a time, the illusion held, fueled by wine, laughter, and the belief that his good fortune would last forever. The younger son's season of excess was destined to end. His wealth evaporated, and his so-called companions abandoned him. Alone and desperate, he wandered the streets, his fine clothes now tattered. The city, once welcoming, now offered only hardship and humiliation. Driven to despair, the younger son envied the pigs he was hired to tend. Stripped of pride and possessions, he confronted the consequences of his choices. He recalled the abundance of his father's house and the warmth of his family's love. A flicker of hope emerged, remembering his father's kindness and capacity for forgiveness. The younger son felt a glimmer of hope pierce through the darkness. He realized that even the lowliest servant in his father's house had a place and purpose. The memory of his father's love burned within him like a beacon. He resolved to return home, not as a son, but as a humbled servant. The decision to return home resonated with the force of a drumbeat in his soul. He would swallow his pride, confess his sins, and plead for his father's mercy. With newfound resolve, he set his face towards home, seeking reconciliation. It was the beginning of a long journey, a testament to the enduring power of love to call us home. Each step on the long road home was a stark reminder of his folly. The once carefree gait of a young man eager to claim his inheritance was now the weary trudge of a penitent soul seeking redemption. The weight of his sins, once carried lightly, now pressed down on him with the force of 1,000 stones. He traveled through villages bustling with life, the sounds of laughter and commerce, a painful counterpoint to the turmoil in his own heart. He saw fathers embracing their sons, their faces etched with love and pride, and a pang of longing resonated deep within him. He had once taken such affection for granted, but now he understood its true value, a treasure more precious than any amount of gold. The memory of his extravagance, once a source of pride, now filled him with shame. He had squandered his inheritance on fleeting pleasures, leaving him with nothing but a bitter aftertaste of regret. The faces of the false friends who had shared in his revelry now haunted his waking hours, their laughter transformed into whispers of condemnation. As he journeyed onward, the landscape changed, mirroring the turmoil in his own soul. Lush fields gave way to arid plains, a testament to the barrenness he had created in his own life. Yet, even in the midst of his despair, a flicker of hope remained, fueled by the memory of his father's love, a beacon guiding him through the darkness of his own making. As he drew closer to home, his steps faltered, his resolve wavering in the face of the unknown. He had spent countless hours rehearsing the words he would say to his father, crafting a speech of apology and supplication, yet each attempt felt hollow, inadequate to express the depth of his remorse. He imagined his father's reaction, the look of disappointment in his eyes, the mixture of anger and sorrow that would surely cloud his features. He had betrayed his father's trust, brought shame upon his family, and squandered the inheritance that represented generations of hard work and sacrifice. How could he possibly atone for such transgressions? Doubts gnawed at the edges of his resolve. Perhaps it was too late for forgiveness, too late to mend the bridges he had so carelessly burned. Perhaps his father would turn him away, his heart hardened by the pain of his betrayal. The thought of rejection, of being cast out from the only home he had ever known, filled him with a terror that surpassed even the depths of his previous despair. Yet even in the midst of his fear, a faint glimmer of hope remained, fueled by the memory of his father's love. He clung to those memories as a drowning man clings to a piece of driftwood, seeking solace in the midst of the storm that raged within him. He would face his father, he resolved, and throw himself upon his mercy. For even if he was rejected, it was better to seek forgiveness than to live with the unbearable weight of his sins. The closer he got to home, the more vivid his memories became. The familiar scent of freshly tilled soil, the sound of his mother's laughter echoing from the kitchen, the sight of his brother working diligently in the fields. Each sensory detail served as a poignant reminder of the life he had so carelessly discarded. He had walked for what felt like an eternity, his body weary, his spirit burdened by regret. Yet as he approached his childhood home, a surge of hope coursed through him. He remembered his father's unwavering kindness, his capacity for forgiveness that knew no bounds. It was this hope, this fragile belief in his father's love, that had sustained him throughout his arduous journey. He knew he did not deserve to be welcomed back with open arms. He had squandered his father's wealth, brought shame upon his family, and broken their hearts. He was no longer worthy to be called a son, but perhaps he dared to hope he could at least earn a place as a servant in his father's house, toiling alongside those who had remained faithful, seeking redemption through humility and hard work. The prodigal son clung to this hope as a lifeline, a beacon of light in the darkness of his despair. He had made the decision to return, to face the consequences of his actions, and to seek reconciliation, no matter the cost. His heart ached with a mixture of fear and anticipation, for he knew that the moment of truth was at hand, the moment when his fate would be decided, not by his own merits, but by the depth of his father's love. A father's vigil, watching and waiting. The father, burdened by the absence of his youngest son, climbed to the highest point of his property, his heart heavy with longing. From this vantage point, he would gaze out at the road, searching for any sign of his beloved son's return. Days turned into months, and still no sign. His hair grew whiter, his steps slower, but his love never wavered. He refused to give up hope. He knew his son was out there, lost and alone, and he waited, praying for his return. The prodigal son's return, a sight that melted a father's heart. As the sun set, a figure emerged on the horizon. The father, weary from years of waiting, could barely believe his eyes. Could it be his son returning home? He squinted, heart pounding, as the figure drew closer. The young man, now weary and tattered, was unmistakable. The father recognized his son's familiar gait. A surge of emotion washed over him. He couldn't wait another moment. He ran, heart bursting with joy. The workers watched in amazement. They had never seen him so animated. Years of worry melted away. The father ran, arms outstretched, heart overflowing with love. The son, filled with shame and longing, looked up. He saw overwhelming love in his father's eyes. Embracing the unworthy, an outpouring of unconditional love. The father, his heart overflowing with compassion, reached his son and enveloped him in a warm embrace. The prodigal son, his body racked with sobs, collapsed against his father's chest, the weight of his guilt and shame threatening to consume him. He had rehearsed words of apology, crafted speeches of repentance, but in that moment, all that came out was a choked whisper, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." The father, unfazed by his son's ragged appearance and mumbled confession, held him tighter, as if to shield him from the years of hardship and regret. There was no judgment in his eyes, no condemnation, only an overwhelming outpouring of love and forgiveness. He had waited so long for this moment, had yearned for his son's return with every fiber of his being. Now, with his son safe in his arms, nothing else mattered. The other workers, witnessing this tender reunion, stood speechless, their own eyes welling up with tears. They had heard whispers of the younger son's reckless choices, his descent into a life of extravagance and sin. They had witnessed the father's silent suffering, the heavy toll that his absence had taken on their master. And yet, here he was, welcoming his wayward son back into the fold with open arms, no questions asked, no recriminations offered. The father, unwilling to let go, gently pulled back, his hands resting on his son's shoulders. He looked at him, eyes filled with love and heartache. The son, unable to meet his father's gaze, kept his eyes fixed on the ground. "Bring the best robe," the father called out, and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. The servants scurried to fulfill their master's wishes. They had never seen him so happy, so full of life. The weight of his sorrow seemed to lift as they witnessed this reunion. The robe, a symbol of honor, was draped over the son's shoulders. The ring, a signet of authority, was placed on his finger. And the sandals, a mark of dignity, were placed on his feet. With each act, the son's shame dissipated, replaced by hope. He had returned home a broken man, expecting judgment. Instead, he was met with an outpouring of grace and compassion. "My son has come home. He was lost and is found," the father proclaimed with joy. "Let us have a feast and celebrate." The news spread like wildfire, igniting joy in all who heard it. Servants rushed to prepare the finest food and wine. Music filled the air, replacing the somber silence. Laughter echoed through the halls, washing away worry and sorrow. The father, his eyes twinkling with happiness, ensured his son was seated at his right hand, the place of honor. The feast was a celebration of redemption, a testament to forgiveness and love. The prodigal son, surrounded by family, felt a sense of belonging. He had tasted freedom, but it was here, in his father's house, that he truly found himself. The fatted calf was slaughtered, a symbol of celebration, reserved for special occasions. Music and dancing filled the courtyard, expressions of pure joy. The father, his heart overflowing, watched his son laugh with siblings, a scene he feared he'd never see. The feast celebrated the father's love, a love that knew no bounds, a love that healed wounds and restored relationships. The elder son, returning from a long day's work in the fields, noticed an unusual commotion as he approached his family home. The familiar sounds of the evening chores were replaced by a cacophony of music and laughter, a melody both alluring and unsettling in its unfamiliarity. He had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythms of the estate, the predictable cadence of their daily lives. A flicker of annoyance crossed his features. What could possibly warrant such revelry? He had dutifully tended to his responsibilities, his back aching from the day's labor, his hands calloused from years of honest toil. He had never shirked his duty, never sought anything more than the satisfaction of a day's work well done. As he drew closer, the music grew louder, the rhythmic beat of drums and the joyous strains of a flute weaving their way into his weary heart. Curious, he quickened his pace, his mind racing with possibilities. Had a long-lost relative arrived unexpectedly? Was it a celebration of an abundant harvest, a reward for their collective efforts? He had always been a serious young man, more comfortable with the predictable rhythm of the seasons than with spontaneous displays of emotion. Yet even his reserved nature couldn't completely dampen the curiosity that stirred within him. He approached the house, his senses alert, eager to unravel the mystery behind this unexpected celebration. Reaching the edge of the courtyard, the elder son paused, hesitant to intrude on what was clearly a joyous occasion. He hailed one of the servants, a young man he had known since childhood, who was hurrying past, a tray laden with delicacies in his hands. "Tell me, friend," he inquired, his voice a mixture of curiosity and restrained annoyance, "what is the meaning of this merrymaking? What festival has prompted such extravagance?" The servant, his face flushed with excitement and a touch of wine, beamed at the elder son. "Your brother has returned," he exclaimed, his words tumbling over each other in his haste to share the news. "Your father has welcomed him home with open arms. They are feasting and celebrating his return even as we speak." The elder son recoiled as if struck. His brother returned, the brother who had so callously demanded his inheritance, who had abandoned their family and squandered his fortune on frivolous pursuits, the brother whose absence had cast a long shadow over their lives, a constant reminder of his betrayal. A bitter taste rose in his throat, a mixture of anger and resentment. How could his father so easily forgive such a transgression? Where was the justice in welcoming back a prodigal son with open arms, while he, the dutiful son, had toiled faithfully all these years, his loyalty taken for granted? Anger flared within him, hot and consuming, eclipsing the curiosity that had initially drawn him towards the celebration. He stood rooted to the spot, his fists clenched, his jaw set in a grim line. The joyous music, once intriguing, now grated on his nerves, each note a discordant reminder of his brother's return and his father's seemingly misplaced forgiveness. He turned away from the house, his heart heavy with a mixture of betrayal and indignation. He could not bring himself to join the festivities, to feign happiness at his brother's return. It felt like a betrayal of his own sacrifices, a devaluation of his years of unwavering loyalty. "Go and tell your father," he instructed the servant, his voice cold and distant, "that I have served him faithfully all these years, never disobeying his commands. Yet he has never given me even a goat to celebrate with my friends." The servant, taken aback by the elder son's bitterness, hesitated, sensing the depth of his anger. He had always known the elder brother to be serious and responsible, but he had never seen him so enraged. The joy he had felt moments before evaporated, replaced by a growing sense of unease. "But your brother has returned," the servant stammered, hoping to reason with the elder son, to remind him of the miracle that had occurred. He was lost, and now he is found. Surely you can understand your father's joy. The elder son, his heart hardened by resentment, remained unmoved by the servant's plea. "All these years I have slaved for him," he retorted, his voice laced with bitterness, never disobeying his orders in any way. "Yet he has never given me as much as a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends." The father, hearing the commotion outside, emerged from the house, his face etched with concern. The joy he had felt moments before, the elation of being reunited with his lost son, was now tempered by the realization that his happiness was not complete. His elder son, his dutiful and responsible firstborn, was hurting, his heart closed off to the spirit of forgiveness and reconciliation that permeated the celebration. "Son, you're always with me," the father said, his voice filled with compassion, reaching out to his elder son with words of love and reassurance. "All that I have is yours." He understood his son's anger, the years of unspoken resentment that had simmered beneath the surface of his obedience. The father's words, spoken with such tenderness and understanding, seemed to hang in the air, a stark contrast to the bitterness that emanated from his elder son. The other guests, sensing the shift in mood, fell silent, their laughter and chatter fading into a respectful hush. The elder son, his arms crossed defiantly, averted his gaze. He couldn't bear to look at his father, couldn't bear to witness the genuine love and concern reflected in his eyes. He felt unseen, unheard, his own sacrifices overshadowed by his brother's reckless choices and subsequent return. A brother's shadow, the unseen wounds of comparison. The elder son's refusal to join the celebration was not simply about a fatted calf or a night of revelry. It was about the unspoken burdens of duty, the weight of expectations, the feeling of being perpetually in the shadow of a brother who had always been the center of attention. He had always been the responsible one, the one who followed the rules, the one who never strayed from the path laid out for him. He had found solace in his routines, his sense of self-worth, tied to his ability to fulfill his obligations. And yet, a part of him yearned for recognition, for a sign that his sacrifices had not gone unnoticed. The prodigal son's return and his father's effusive joy had ripped open these old wounds, exposing the raw nerve of insecurity that lay beneath the elder son's stoic facade. He felt invisible, his own pain and longing eclipsed by the drama of his brother's return. The father, though heartbroken by his elder son's reaction, did not force him to join the celebration. He understood that true reconciliation, true healing, could not be forced. It would require time, patience, and a willingness on the elder son's part to confront the bitterness that festered within him. And so, the father watched as his eldest son turned and walked away, his heart heavy with a love that encompassed both his sons, each in their own unique way, each deserving of his compassion and understanding. reflecting on our own lives. The parable of the prodigal son holds a timeless mirror to our lives, reflecting our struggles, yearnings, love, and errors. We see ourselves in the younger son's impulsiveness and the elder son's resentment. The parable reminds us of our journey, our burdens, and our capacity for love and missteps. It challenges us to confront our shadows and embrace forgiveness. The beauty of the parable transcends time, speaking to our deepest longings. It resonates with everyone, regardless of background or beliefs, from the single mother to the businessman to the teenager. Embracing our shared humanity, the universality of the prodigal's journey. The prodigal son's journey unfolds every day across cultures and continents. It is the journey of the addict seeking help, the estranged friend mending a broken bond, the prisoner yearning for a second chance. It is the journey of the soul, breaking free, exploring uncharted territories, discovering who we are meant to be. Sometimes that journey takes us far from home, leading us down unexpected paths, testing our resilience and capacity for love. In moments of brokenness, when we feel most lost, the seeds of redemption are sown. It is when we hit rock bottom, when the consequences of our choices become undeniable, that we see the path back to wholeness, to a place of belonging, to the embrace of unconditional love. The elder son's struggle is also universal. It is the struggle to forgive, to let go of resentment, to open our hearts to those who have hurt us, even when every fiber of our being cries out for justice, for retribution. It is the challenge of embracing the complexities of love, recognizing that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, but an act of profound strength, a testament to the enduring power of hope over despair. The Father's embrace, finding solace in unconditional love. At the heart of the parable lies the Father, embodying compassion, forgiveness, and unconditional love. He runs to meet his son with open arms and a heart overflowing with joy. The Father's love transcends human limitations, welcoming us home, no matter how far we've strayed. It is a love that heals, mends, and restores our faith in ourselves and humanity.